6 weeks later, Jason Bourne is once again fleeing through Moscow, just another day in his chaotic life. Wounded and barely holding himself together, he's chased by police into a crowded train station where officers begin sweeping through the railcars. Bourne waits patiently until the train starts moving, then leaps off mid-motion. The officers spot him and the pursuit continues, but he slips into a nearby pharmacy to treat his injuries. While stitching himself up, disturbing flashes of memory return. He's restrained, part of some covert program, a bag pulled over his head. Before he can process it, police storm into the pharmacy. Bourne reacts instantly, disarming the first officer and turning the weapon on the second. Without firing a shot, he calmly walks out, vanishing once again. Back at CIA headquarters, Director Ezra Kramer gathers Pamela Landy and senior staff. He reviews a recorded conversation involving Abbott, visibly shaken by how deep the corruption runs. Still, Bourne remains his primary concern. With Jason probing CIA operations and clearly hunting for answers, Kramer declares that he must be found. His guiding philosophy, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Across the Atlantic in New York, investigative journalist Simon Ross meets with a source about a shadow project called Blackbriar. He senses something rotten beneath the surface and is determined to expose it. Meanwhile, Bourne pays a visit to Martin Kreutz, Marie's brother. The meeting is somber. Jason delivers the painful news of her death and admits he killed the man responsible at the airport. It's a heavy confession, one that shows the cost of his past. Ross later calls a colleague, revealing that his informant has deep knowledge, everything from Bourne's identity to Blackbriar itself. That phone call doesn't go unnoticed. It's flagged, routed through multiple CIA stations, and eventually lands on Deputy Director Noah Vozen's desk. Vozen mobilizes his team immediately, classifying the situation as a high-level security threat. He wants the leak identified and demands real-time updates on Ross, even before Ross knows his next move. Bourne's attention is caught when he spots his own name and Marie's in a newspaper article. Realizing the journalist may have credible information, Jason decides to track down the source of the leak. Unaware he's under surveillance, Simon heads into work while CIA teams monitor his every move. A coworker informs him that someone is on the line asking for him. It's Bourne calling from an untraceable phone. Since it isn't Simon's personal device, the CIA can't intercept the conversation. Bourne arranges to meet at a train station in 30 minutes. As Simon leaves the building and chats with his cab driver about directions, the CIA picks up the conversation and quickly deploys a Blackbriar asset. At the station, Simon waits nervously on the platform. Bourne observes from a distance, noting surveillance teams positioned throughout. Casually passing by, he slips a phone into Simon's pocket and activates it remotely. Through the hidden line, he warns Simon about the agents surrounding him and directs him toward a nearby bus terminal. With no access to the conversation, the CIA team grows anxious. Following Bourne's instructions, Simon positions himself beside a hooded man. Bourne tells him to bolt for a hidden stairwell once a bus arrives. When it does, agents surge forward, but one who chases Simon is swiftly taken down by Bourne in a brutal, efficient scuffle. The hooded man is suddenly subdued and injected with something mysterious, adding another layer of chaos. Bourne redirects Simon to the city's busiest terminal. Vozen scrambles his team while their operative, known as Pause, enters the scene. During a tense exchange, Simon reveals that Blackbriar is essentially an evolved version of Treadstone, and that the entire chain of events traces back to Bourne. Simon refuses to reveal his source, but there's no time to argue. Inside the crowded terminal, the CIA taps into surveillance cameras to track Simon. Bourne guides him step by step, weaving through blind spots and avoiding detection. But when Simon crosses paths with a sanitation worker, panic gets the better of him. He runs, immediately triggering alarm bells. Agents close in. Bourne moves silently through the crowd, incapacitating them one by one. He directs Simon into a nearby shop and arrives just in time to eliminate the approaching threat with precise efficiency. 4 more agents rush in to assist, but it barely slows Bourne down. One by one, they're taken out with brutal efficiency, and Jason walks away without a scratch. Simon watches in stunned silence, struggling to process what he's witnessing. Their brief window of relief closes quickly when a surveillance camera captures them together. At CIA headquarters, Noah Vozen freezes as he realizes Bourne is actively protecting Simon. Their final contingency, the Blackbriar operative known as Pause, moves into position above the terminal, assembling his sniper perch. After facial recognition confirms the target, the CIA disables the terminal's cameras to give their shooter a clean line of sight. Bourne urgently warns Simon to stay put, but panic overrides reason. Simon bolts and a single shot rings out. He drops instantly. Without hesitation, Jason pulls the documents from Simon's jacket and disappears into the chaos, moving too fast for Pause to line up a second shot. Rather than flee entirely, Bourne chooses to hunt the hunter. He tracks the sniper's route but arrives seconds too late. The two men lock eyes from a distance, a silent acknowledgement before Pause vanishes. Later, Bourne holes up in an internet cafe, reviewing the notes he recovered. Two phrases stand out: Blackbriar and "it all started with Jason Bourne." Simon had scribbled down several names. Jason searches them and uncovers a connection to an investment banking firm. He notes the address, his next destination. Elsewhere, Simon's source spirals into panic after learning of the journalist's death. Realizing he may be next, he hurriedly gathers classified Blackbriar files and flees into the night. Back in Washington, higher authorities force Director Kramer to bring Pamela Landy into the escalating situation. Reluctant but out of options, he fills her in. Upon arriving, Pamela wastes no time. She bluntly informs the team that Bourne is unlike any target they've faced before. Jason reaches the investment firm's headquarters, but the building appears empty. As distant sirens approach, he leaves before authorities arrive. Pamela devises a clever way to identify the mole. Cross-reference all personnel with Blackbriar clearance whose phones were switched off during the train station incident. 3 names surface. Combined with evidence found at Simon's apartment, they identify the leak Neil Daniels, stationed in Italy, which conveniently matches Simon's recent travel. But Bourne is already ahead of them. He infiltrates the building before the CIA team arrives. As he moves through the corridors, intense flashes of memory hit him. In one, a recruiter questions his commitment to the program. When he resists, the response is brutal torture used as leverage. The memory snaps away as Bourne hears approaching footsteps. The CIA unit enters cautiously, noticing signs of forced entry. As they advance toward the final room, Bourne explodes into motion, incapacitating both agents in seconds. Suddenly, Nikki Parsons steps out from the shadows. Bourne pivots, weapon raised. Before either can react further, her phone rings. It's Vosen. Nikki answers, calmly reporting that 2 agents are down and claiming she's alone. Though she lies, Vosen is convinced Bourne is present and says reinforcements will arrive within the hour, though in reality, they're only minutes away. After hanging up, Nikki tells Jason her car is parked behind the building and that she knows Daniel's exact location. Thinking fast, Bourne calls local police to report armed men in the area, firing a few shots to sell the story. As Jason and Nikki slip out the back, CIA agents rush in, only to find themselves surrounded by local officers who mistake them for suspects. The confusion creates the perfect distraction for Bourne to vanish. Following the incident, Pamela questions Vosen about Operation Blackbriar. He explains that Daniels supervised operations across southern Europe and North Africa, meaning he holds sensitive intelligence, names, operations, everything. Meanwhile, in a quiet cafeteria, Jason studies a photo recovered from Daniels' files. He asks Nikki about a man pictured beside Daniels. She claims she doesn't recognize him, but Jason does from his earliest days in the program. Pressed further, Nikki admits the truth. Before field deployment, recruits were systematically broken down mentally. Psychological dismantling came first, then behavioral conditioning reshaped them into operatives. Jason, it turns out, was patient 0, the first operative to endure the program's full psychological dismantling and reconstruction. At CIA headquarters, Daniel's location is finally confirmed. The team prepares swiftly, assigning a Blackbriar operative known as Dash to eliminate him. Nikki attempts to pull the full tracking data, but is locked out of the system, managing only to retrieve Dash's image and name. That's enough. The plan becomes simple. Follow the assassin to Daniels. They spot Dash and Jason begins shadowing him through the winding city streets. When the CIA detects Nikki's unauthorized access, Vosen immediately escalates the order. Once Daniels is dealt with, Dash is to eliminate both Nikki and Bourne. Pamela objects strongly, arguing they're compounding their mistakes. Vosen ignores her and she walks out, visibly disturbed. Jason trails Dash to a quiet stop. He notices Dash discreetly leaving a bag beside a parked motorcycle. Moments later, Daniel's vehicle approaches. Bourne moves to intercept, but realizes too late the abandoned bike is rigged. The explosion rips through the street, killing Daniels instantly and hurling Jason into unconsciousness. When Bourne regains his senses, he sees Dash fleeing the scene. Without hesitation, he commandeers a nearby motorbike and gives chase. Police flood the area, but Jason maneuvers through traffic with impossible precision, weaving between cars, launching over obstacles, vanishing down tight corridors. Sirens echo behind him, yet no one can close the distance. Meanwhile, Dash has picked up Nikki's trail. She disappears into a crowded marketplace, using the chaos to slow him down before breaking into a sprint. From afar, Jason spots Dash pursuing her and redirects his chase across rooftops. Nikki ducks into a building, trying to remain silent as footsteps echo behind her. Above, Jason smashes through windows and leaps across narrow gaps to keep pace. Inside, Nikki is cornered. Just as Dash closes in, Bourne crashes through a window, launching into a brutal hand-to-hand fight. It's a clash between two elite operatives, one forged in treadstone, the other shaped by Blackbriar. The fight is relentless, technical, and evenly matched. They counter, grapple, strike, and adapt in seconds. Eventually, Jason gains the upper hand, finishing the confrontation with decisive force. Using the chaos to their advantage, Jason and Nikki manipulate the situation so Vosen believes they were both killed in the altercation. Even so, Vosen demands visual confirmation of the bodies. Elsewhere, director Kramer meets privately with Vosen. He makes it clear he will not shoulder the blame if Blackbriar collapses, which is precisely why Pamela has been pulled into the operation. Later, in a rare moment of vulnerability, Jason confides in Nikki. He remembers every mission, every name, every life taken. The weight of it sits heavy on him, and remorse lingers beneath his calm exterior. Pamela, digging through archived Treadstone records, reviews the long list of Bourne's assassinations. In the files, she discovers the name of the program's chief medical officer, Dr. Albert Hirsch. After parting ways with Nikki at a station, Jason heads to the morgue to examine Daniel's belongings. Among the effects, he finds an address linked to a CIA facility, his next lead. Back in Washington, Vosen receives unsettling confirmation. Bourne is alive. At the same time, one of Pamela's agents discovers that one of Jason's old passports was recently used. Pamela keeps that information to herself. She's forming her own strategy. Bourne arrives in New York, takes a cab, and positions himself in a building directly across from CIA headquarters. Through binoculars, he observes Pamela and Vosen inside. He notices Vosen discreetly locking files inside a secure safe. Boldly, Jason calls Pamela directly. She thanks him for the earlier recording he provided and tells him his real name and birth date, pieces of his stolen identity. The call is monitored, and Vosen quickly senses something isn't right. As Pamela continues speaking, Jason casually remarks that she looks exhausted. That detail sends Vosen into full panic. Bourne must be close. He storms into the operations room and announces that Bourne is within a 1,000-yard radius of the building, triggering emergency lockdown protocols. Pamela steps outside and receives a coded message containing a location. Vosen's team intercepts it. Paz is instructed to arm himself and prepare for deployment. Vosen orders all available units to converge on the designated site. Meanwhile, Bourne does the unthinkable. He simply walks into CIA headquarters. Calling Vosen directly, he taunts him, calmly revealing that he's already inside the building. Within moments, he cracks open the safe and retrieves the hidden documents. He scans the contents just long enough to understand their importance. Time is short. With alarms closing in, Bourne begins his escape. When confirmation comes in that Vosen's office has been breached and the safe forced open, chaos erupts. Agents scramble back to their vehicles, while Vosen spirals into barely controlled panic. Across the street, Pamela slips into a car with one of her operatives, calmly giving directions. Out on the sidewalk, Jason walks with deliberate ease until armed agents spot him with shoot-to-kill authorization. He takes off, sprinting toward a rooftop parking structure. Within seconds, he hijacks a car and slams into pursuing vehicles, using the collisions as moving shields. Trapped under heavy gunfire and stuck in reverse, Bourne makes a split-second decision. He drives straight off the edge of the structure. The car plummets, smashing into the level below. He barely pauses. Racing down another ramp, he comes face-to-face with Paz, who's been waiting for this moment. Gunfire erupts. Bourne steals a police cruiser and launches it into the chaos of the street below, sirens wailing as traffic scatters. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, an analyst notices something strange about the birth date Pamela gave Jason. It doesn't match official records. Vosen realizes it's not a mistake, it's a code. The numbers point to a specific location, their old training facility. He orders every available unit to follow his vehicle. Jason tears through the city, turning the stolen cruiser into a battering ram. He shoves enemy cars aside like debris, clearing his path with ruthless precision, but Paz refuses to fall behind. In a final attempt to replicate a maneuver once used against Bourne, Paz forces a dangerous collision. It goes wrong. Both vehicles flip violently and crash. Jason crawls from the wreckage, weapon trained on Paz. After a long beat, he lowers the gun. He spares him. Elsewhere, Vosen frantically calls Dr. Albert Hirsch, warning him to evacuate the facility. Hirsch refuses. He insists he'll hold Bourne off himself. As Jason approaches the compound, flashes of memory grow sharper: hallways, interrogation rooms, cold concrete walls. Outside the building, he meets Pamela and hands her a bag stuffed with incriminating files. He trusts her to do what's right. She urges him to come with her. He shakes his head. This is where it began. This is where it ends. Jason steps inside. Moments later, a convoy of CIA vehicles screeches into the lot. Pamela quickly re-enters the building and slips into an office. As agents flood the corridors, Bourne seals the elevator behind him, forcing them to take the stairs. While the building descends into chaos, Pamela transmits the classified documents via fax, page after page feeding into the system. To everyone's shock, Paz, battered but alive, storms into the building as well. Vosen finally reaches Pamela just as the last sheet finishes transmitting. He stares at her in disbelief. Calmly, she advises him to get a good lawyer. Upstairs, Jason walks through a corridor now painfully familiar. The memories are no longer fragments, they're crystal clear. Dr. Hirsch steps out from the shadows. Jason demands to know why he was chosen. Hirsch answers with brutal honesty. He wasn't chosen, he volunteered. He hands Jason a pair of dog tags bearing his real name. The past slams back into place, the moment he agreed to surrender his identity, to be reshaped into a weapon. He remembers accepting a new name. Remembering promising to do whatever it took to protect American lives. For a brief second, Hirsch's words seem to steady him. In one vivid flashback, Jason executes a masked man in a training room, the moment David Webb truly became Jason Bourne. Footsteps echo in the hallway. Jason lowers his weapon and leaps through a window. He races down the stairwell, paws closed behind. On the rooftop, Bourne finds himself cornered. Paws raises his gun but hesitates. He asks Jason why he didn't shoot him earlier. Bourne fires back a question of his own. Does Paws even know why he's supposed to kill him? Sirens and boots thunder onto the rooftop as Vosen and his agents arrive. Without another word, Bourne jumps. A shot grazes him midair as he plunges into the river below. Cut to a Senate hearing. Pamela presents the exposed Blackbriar files. News spreads quickly. Director Kramer faces criminal investigation. Dr. Hirsch and Deputy Director Vosen are arrested. 3 days of searching turn up nothing. No body, no trace. Watching a news broadcast, Nikki allows herself a faint smile. Far below the surface, Jason Bourne swims steadily through open water, alive, unbroken, and finally free. Analysis: what if the deadliest weapon in the world was a man who doesn't even know who he truly is? No gadgets, no flashy suits, no one-liners, just instinct, precision, and a past that refuses to stay buried. The Bourne Ultimatum isn't just another action movie. It's the film that changed how modern thrillers are made. When it hit theaters in 2007, it didn't rely on fantasy or spectacle. It delivered something far more intense: realism. This wasn't about saving the world. It was about uncovering the truth. Jason Bourne isn't chasing villains for glory. He's chasing his own identity. And that's what makes this story different. Every punch, every chase, every decision carries emotional weight, because this isn't just survival, it's redemption. Directed by Paul Greengrass and starring Matt Damon, this film took the spy genre and stripped it down to its raw core. The camera shakes, the tension never lets you breathe, the stakes feel real, and unlike traditional spy heroes, Bourne isn't polished or charming. He's haunted, calculating, always one step ahead but always one memory behind. In this video, we're diving deep into the story that brings Bourne face to face with his past, the hidden meaning behind the explosive ending, the subtle details most viewers completely miss, and why this film still stands as one of the greatest action thrillers ever made. So buckle up. Because this isn't just a movie recap. This is the final chapter of a man trying to reclaim his name. Released in 2007, the Bourne Ultimatum arrived at a time when action movies were getting louder, bigger, and more explosive. But this film chose a different path. Directed by Paul Greengrass and starring Matt Damon, this third installment in the Bourne series didn't just continue the story, it intensified it. The genre: action thriller, spy drama, psychological mystery. But more than that, it's a relentless manhunt told with raw realism. The story takes us across the globe, from the crowded streets of London to the tense rooftops of Tangier, from Madrid's shadows to the heart of New York City. Every location feels alive. Every city becomes part of the chase. Now here's the spoiler-free premise. Jason Bourne is closing in on the truth about his past. The covert CIA program that turned him into a weapon, Operation Treadstone, wasn't the end of it. There's something bigger, darker, more dangerous. And the closer Bourne gets to exposing it, the harder the CIA pushes to erase him permanently. This isn't a mission about patriotism. It's not about saving the world. It's about a man trying to understand who he was and whether he can choose who he becomes. Fast-paced, globally scaled, emotionally grounded. The Bourne Ultimatum sets the stage for a final confrontation between a man and the system that created him. On the surface, the Bourne Ultimatum looks like a high-speed spy thriller. But underneath the chases, the rooftops, and the gunfire, this film is about something much deeper. Yes, it's action. Yes, it's espionage. But at its core, it's a story about identity. Jason Bourne isn't fighting to complete a mission. He's fighting to understand who he is. Every fight scene, every escape, every narrow survival moment is driven by one question: who made me this way? This is where the film separates itself from traditional spy movies. Unlike larger-than-life heroes, Bourne is stripped of glamour. No luxury cars, no gadgets, no playful charisma, just instinct, trauma, and a relentless pursuit of truth. The central themes driving the story include identity and self-discovery. Can a man outrun the version of himself he once chose to become? Government control and moral ambiguity. What happens when institutions cross ethical lines in the name of security? Free will versus conditioning. Is Bourne a monster or a man who was manipulated? Redemption. Can someone trained to kill reclaim their humanity? Emotionally, the tone is tense and urgent. The handheld camera work creates constant instability, mirroring Bourne's fractured mind. The pacing never slows because neither does the pressure closing in on him. And this isn't escapist fantasy. It's grounded, it's gritty. It feels uncomfortably real. The film is designed for viewers who want more than explosions, for those who appreciate intelligent storytelling wrapped inside high-stakes action. If you enjoy spy films that challenge the system instead of celebrating it, if you prefer realism over spectacle, and if you're drawn to characters battling their own past, then The Bourne Ultimatum delivers something far more powerful than a typical action movie. It delivers a psychological war disguised as a chase. The story picks up exactly where the previous chapter left off. Jason Bourne is still running, still searching, still hunted, but this time he's closer than ever to the truth. The spark that ignites everything is a newspaper article. A journalist named Simon Ross uncovers a secret CIA operation connected to Bourne's past, something called Blackbriar. When Bourne reads it, he knows this is the lead he's been waiting for, so he makes contact. And that single decision sets off a chain reaction. The CIA intercepts the communication. Deputy Director Noah Vosen immediately launches a full-scale manhunt. Surveillance cameras activate. Agents mobilize. Assassins are deployed. What follows is one of the most intense sequences in modern action cinema, Waterloo Station in London. Bourne guides Ross through a sea of commuters using only a phone and instinct. It's brilliant, it's calculated, but it ends in tragedy. Ross is assassinated. That failure hits hard. Because now Bourne understands, the CIA will kill anyone who gets close to the truth, so he goes deeper. From London to Madrid, from Madrid to Tangier, Bourne follows the breadcrumbs leading back to the origin of the program that created him. In Tangier, he encounters another trained asset sent to eliminate a target. But here's the shift: Bourne intervenes not just to survive, but to save someone. He disables the assassin instead of killing him outright. This is no longer just about escape, it's about transformation. Finally, the trail leads to New York City, the heart of the system. There, Bourne confronts Dr. Albert Hirsch, the man responsible for turning him into a weapon. And in that moment, everything comes back. His real name, his decision, his choice to volunteer for the program. He wasn't forced. He stepped into it willingly. But here's the difference. The man who volunteered back then isn't the same man standing there now. The CIA closes in one last time. Shots are fired. Bourne is wounded. And in a final act of defiance, he dives into the river below, disappearing beneath the surface. But this isn't defeat, it's rebirth, because this entire journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming control over his own identity. Let's talk about that ending, because on the surface, it looks simple. Bourne finds the man who created him. He remembers everything. He gets shot. He jumps into the river. But what actually happened? When Jason Bourne confronts Dr. Albert Hirsch in New York, the final piece of the puzzle clicks into place. His real name is David Webb, and more importantly, he volunteered for the Treadstone program. That revelation changes everything. For 2 films, we believed Bourne was a victim of a system that kidnapped and brainwashed him. But the truth is more complicated. He chose to enter the program. However, here's the deeper meaning. Yes, he volunteered, but he didn't volunteer to lose his humanity. The conditioning, the manipulation, the moral erosion, that's what the system did to him. So when Hirsch tries to reduce him to a test subject again, Bourne refuses to play the role. That's the real victory. Now let's break down the symbolism. After being shot, Bourne jumps into the East River. Throughout the trilogy, water has symbolized rebirth. The very first film begins with him being pulled from the sea, unconscious, identity erased. And here we are again. This time, he enters the water fully aware of who he is. The news report playing over the final scene states that Bourne's body hasn't been recovered. Then we see him floating underwater, motionless. For a moment it feels like death, but then his eyes open. He swims away. That final movement is powerful. It represents choice. He's no longer running blindly. He knows his name. He knows his past. And he chooses to live on his own terms. Is it a clean ending? Not entirely. The CIA isn't dismantled overnight. The system still exists, but Bourne is no longer owned by it. The ending isn't about destroying the agency. It's about reclaiming identity. Jason Bourne began as a weapon without memory. He ends as a man who remembers everything and refuses to be controlled. And that's what makes this ending so powerful. Now here's where the Bourne Ultimatum becomes even more impressive. Because beneath the action, beneath the chaos, the film is layered with subtle details most viewers never consciously notice. Let's start with the most powerful symbol in the entire trilogy, water. Water appears at key turning points in Bourne's journey. The first film begins with him being pulled from the ocean, reborn without memory, and this film ends with him submerged again, but the difference is everything. In the beginning, he's unconscious, identity erased. At the end, he dives in fully aware of who he is. Water isn't just an escape route, it's transformation. It represents rebirth not as a weapon, but as a self-aware human being reclaiming his life. Now let's talk about surveillance. Throughout the film, we constantly see computer screens, camera feeds, satellite imagery, control rooms filled with analysts. The system is always watching. The CIA views the world through monitors and digital grids. Bourne, on the other hand, moves through physical space, streets, rooftops, crowds. He relies on instinct, not technology. Visually, this creates a powerful contrast. The institution watches. Bourne acts. Every time he escapes a surveillance net, it symbolizes more than survival. It represents breaking free from institutional control. Another subtle detail, mirrors and reflections. Bourne is often framed through glass, reflections, or fragmented angles. It's a visual metaphor for his fractured identity. He's literally shown as a divided image, the man he was versus the man he's becoming. Even small character choices matter. Notice how Bourne increasingly avoids unnecessary killing. Earlier in his life, he followed orders without hesitation. But in this film, he intervenes to save lives, even stopping another assassin. That shift isn't random. It's the film quietly showing us that he's already changed, long before he fully regains his memory. And then there's the pacing itself, the handheld camera, the shaky movement, the chaotic editing. It's not just a stylistic choice. It mirrors Bourne's mental state, unstable, pressured, constantly adapting. The audience doesn't feel comfortable, because Bourne isn't comfortable. Every detail, from water to camera work, reinforces the same central idea. This story isn't just about a spy being hunted. It's about a man breaking free from the identity he was engineered to become. And that's the brilliance hidden beneath the action. Now let's step behind the camera, because what makes the Bourne Ultimatum even more impressive is how much of its intensity was real. First, the action. Matt Damon didn't just show up and let stunt doubles do the heavy lifting. He went through extensive combat training, weapons drills, and tactical movement preparation to make Bourne's movements look instinctive and efficient, and it shows. Every fight feels raw, fast, brutal. There's no flashy choreography, just survival. Now take the Tangier rooftop chase. Those narrow alleys, real. Those jumps between buildings, mostly practical. The camera operators were running alongside the actors in tight spaces, capturing that chaotic, breathless energy live. Then there's the legendary Waterloo Station sequence in London. Hundreds of extras, multiple moving parts. Real-time coordination. The scene required massive logistical planning, yet it feels spontaneous and unpredictable on screen. That realism became the film's signature. Director Paul Greengrass pushed for a documentary-style approach. The handheld camera work wasn't just aesthetic, it was intentional. He wanted the audience to feel like they were inside the chase, not watching it from a safe distance. And here's something many people don't realize. The film won 3 Academy Awards for film editing, sound editing, and sound mixing. That editing style, sharp cuts, kinetic pacing, overlapping tension, became the blueprint for action films that followed. You can see its influence in countless thrillers released after 2007. Another interesting fact, the script underwent rewrites during production to tighten pacing and sharpen the narrative focus. The goal was clarity and momentum, no wasted scenes, no filler. Even the minimal use of CGI was deliberate. The filmmakers prioritized practical stunts and real environments to keep everything grounded. The result: an action film that feels immediate, physical, almost uncomfortable in its realism. The Bourne Ultimatum didn't just deliver intense sequences, it redefined how action movies are made. And that legacy still echoes through the genre today. To truly understand the impact of the Bourne Ultimatum, we have to compare it. First, within its own trilogy, the earlier films built the mystery. They introduced the amnesia, the assassins, the shadowy programs, but this third installment, it delivers momentum, closure, precision. It doesn't just continue the story, it accelerates it. The pacing is tighter, the stakes feel higher. And emotionally, this is Bourne at his most resolved. Now let's step outside the franchise. For decades, the gold standard of spy cinema was James Bond. Bond is polished, suave, equipped with gadgets. His world is stylish and often larger than life. Bourne is the opposite. No gadgets, no tuxedo, no martinis, just a passport, a phone, and pure instinct. Where Bond operates in spectacle, Bourne operates in realism. His fights are messy, his escapes feel desperate, his victories come at emotional cost. And here's the interesting part. After the Bourne Ultimatum released, even the Bond franchise shifted tone. Films like Casino Royale embraced grittier realism, less fantasy, more physicality. That influence is undeniable. Beyond Bond, look at modern action thrillers, the fast cuts, handheld cameras, grounded choreography. Many adopted the Bourne formula, but what does the Bourne Ultimatum do better than most? It balances action with identity. The chase isn't just external, it's internal. The villain isn't just an agent or a program. It's the system that shaped him. What might it lack? If you're looking for spectacle, glamour, or escapist fantasy, you won't find much of it here. The film is intense, sometimes even exhausting, but that's the point. The Bourne Ultimatum didn't try to outshine its competitors with flash. It redefined the genre by stripping it down. And in doing so, it changed spy cinema forever. When the Bourne Ultimatum hit theaters in 2007, it wasn't just another sequel arriving quietly. It was an event. Audiences walked in expecting a strong continuation. They walked out calling it the best film of the trilogy. The reaction was immediate. Viewers praised the intensity, the pacing, and the emotional payoff. Unlike many third installments that feel stretched or unnecessary, this one felt earned, like the final piece of a carefully constructed puzzle. At the box office, the numbers backed it up. The film grossed over $440 million worldwide, making it the highest-earning entry in the franchise at the time. That kind of success doesn't happen without word of mouth. But what about the critics? They were equally impressed. Reviewers applauded the sharp editing, the grounded action, and the refusal to rely on over-the-top spectacle. Many called it one of the best action films of the decade. It even went on to win 3 Academy Awards, a rare achievement for a fast-paced spy thriller. Now here's the interesting question. Was it overrated? Hardly. If anything, it set a new standard. It proved that action films could be intelligent, tightly crafted, and emotionally resonant, all at the same time. Was it divisive? Only slightly. Some viewers found the handheld camera style overwhelming. The rapid cuts and shaky movement weren't for everyone, but even critics of the style acknowledged the film's effectiveness. In the end, the Bourne Ultimatum didn't just satisfy audiences, it raised expectations for the entire genre. And more than 15 years later, it's still referenced as one of the most influential spy thrillers of the modern era. That's not hype. That's legacy. So after all the chases, all the revelations, all the questions about identity and control, what's the final verdict on the Bourne Ultimatum? Simply put, it's a masterclass in modern action storytelling. Let's start with the strengths. First, the realism. The action feels physical, urgent, and dangerously close. There's no glossy filter here. Every punch lands. Every chase feels exhausting in the best way possible. Second, the pacing. The film wastes no time. From the opening moments to the final dive into the river, it moves with relentless momentum. There's tension in nearly every frame. Third, the emotional arc. This isn't just about a spy evading capture. It's about a man confronting the darkest version of himself and choosing something better. But no film is perfect. The shaky camera style can feel overwhelming for some viewers. The rapid editing, while effective, demands attention and can be disorienting. And supporting characters don't always get the depth they deserve. Still, those are minor dents in an otherwise powerful machine. So who should watch this film? If you love intelligent thrillers, if you appreciate grounded action over fantasy spectacle, if you're drawn to stories about identity, accountability, and redemption, this is essential viewing. The Bourne Ultimatum doesn't rely on glamour or gimmicks. It relies on tension, precision, and character. It closes the trilogy with clarity and impact, proving that a sequel can not only match expectations, but exceed them. In the end, this isn't just one of the best spy films of its era. It's one of the films that changed the genre itself. Reviws. I finally made time to watch the original Bourne trilogy after years of hearing praise for it, and I can honestly say it was worth the wait. I had hesitated at first, unsure whether this type of spy thriller would really suit my taste, which explains why I put it off for so long. Thankfully, those doubts turned out to be unfounded. The Bourne Identity was an unexpectedly refreshing take on a genre that often feels formulaic. While it wasn't flawless, it delivered a tight, engaging story and introduced Matt Damon in a role that initially seemed against type, but quickly proved to be one of his strongest performances. It breathed new life into the espionage thriller and set a strong foundation for what followed. The Bourne Supremacy managed to accomplish what many sequels failed to do, match the quality of the original. It may not have carried quite the same sense of novelty, but it sharpened the tone and deepened the emotional stakes, showing clear growth in both storytelling and intensity. The trilogy concludes with the Bourne Ultimatum, widely considered the standout chapter, and it's hard to argue with that assessment. Although the handheld camera work occasionally feels excessive, to the point of being disorienting, and the climax could have benefited from a slightly clearer resolution, the film excels in nearly every other area. Visually, it maintains the sleek, polished aesthetic of the previous installments while expanding to even more striking international locations. At its best, the restless camera movement heightens the tension and creates a suffocating sense of urgency that fits the story perfectly. The score is layered and propulsive, adding depth and momentum to the unfolding drama. Director Paul Greengrass fully embraces his documentary-inspired style, using it to amplify realism and immediacy throughout the film. What truly elevates the Bourne Ultimatum is its sharp and intelligent script. The narrative never loses its grip, balancing relentless action with meaningful character development. It's an adrenaline-fueled experience, yet it never sacrifices emotional weight. Of the three films, this one arguably explores Jason Bourne's identity and internal struggle most thoroughly. Matt Damon completely inhabits the role here, transforming what was once a surprising casting choice into a defining character of his career. Julia Stiles delivers one of her strongest performances in the series. Joan Allen brings gravitas and control, and David Strath makes for a convincingly calculating antagonist. Even the supporting cast, though sometimes underutilized, consistently deliver solid performances. Story-wise, Bourne remains on the run, still searching for answers about his past and the shadowy operations that shaped him. A journalist investigating him and a covert CIA program becomes entangled in the pursuit, drawing Bourne back into direct confrontation with those determined to silence him. As alliances shift and secrets surface, the stakes rise steadily toward a powerful and satisfying conclusion. Greengrass pushes the intensity to impressive heights, particularly in the chase sequences, which are gripping and expertly staged. Even scenes set inside CIA control rooms pulse with energy, though these moments occasionally verge on repetition. There are limits to how engaging people staring at monitors can be. The signature shaky cam style, while effective in many instances, sometimes oversteps and makes certain action beats harder to follow. A few quieter pauses might have allowed the tension to breathe more naturally. Overall, the trilogy reaches its peak here, delivering a thrilling and emotionally resonant finale. Fast-paced, grounded, and driven by strong performances, the Bourne Ultimatum stands as a compelling close to one of the most respected action trilogies of its era. It's honestly refreshing to come across a blockbuster that actually trusts its audience with an intelligent storyline. That's one of the many reasons the Bourne Ultimatum feels so different from the typical Hollywood action spectacle. Yes, it delivers everything you expect from a high-stakes thriller: gunfire, brutal hand-to-hand combat, relentless pursuits, but it also layers these elements over a sharp and tightly constructed narrative. Two sequences stand out in particular. The nerve-shredding pursuit through the packed streets and rooftops of Tangier is unforgettable, culminating in a vicious confrontation between Bourne and a determined assassin. Equally gripping is the tense Waterloo Station sequence, built around surveillance and a sniper threat that keeps you on edge from start to finish. In between, we get explosive set pieces, intense close-quarters combat showcasing Bourne's efficient fighting style, bomb blasts, and a car chase that crashes with bone-crunching force. It may not surpass the jaw-dropping finale of the Bourne Supremacy, but it's still a standout moment. Add in the steady stream of twists and shifting loyalties, and you have a thriller that rarely loosens its grip. As a finale to the trilogy, it's a powerful and satisfying conclusion to what has become one of the strongest action series of its era. Being the third chapter, the film admittedly has a tougher task in the story department. The previous installment wrapped up major plot threads in a fairly advanced way, leaving limited room for escalation. Even Matt Damon and director Paul Greengrass have acknowledged that crafting a compelling continuation wasn't easy. The film compensates with expansive, meticulously staged action sequences that dominate much of the runtime, and there's also a narrative device introduced here that I won't spoil, but attentive viewers will certainly notice. Interestingly, among the trilogy, this adaptation reportedly strays the furthest from Robert Ludlum's original novels. Whether that matters depends on how attached you are to the source material. Released in 2007, the film was directed by Paul Greengrass and written primarily by Tony Gilroy, whose adaptation work came shortly before earning Academy Award recognition for other projects. The production spans multiple countries and languages, reinforcing the global scale of Bourne's journey. English speakers should have no trouble following along, even with the frequent shifts in setting. Matt Damon, in his mid to late 30s at the time, returns for his third portrayal of Jason Bourne, a man still unraveling the truth about his past identity and the covert program that shaped him. Even without having seen the first two films, this installment stands reasonably well on its own, though it does reference earlier events, particularly those involving Franka Potent's character. Prior knowledge enhances the experience, but it isn't strictly necessary. The supporting cast adds depth. David Strath brings gravitas, even if his character occasionally feels overshadowed. Joan Allen portrays a principled intelligence officer whose moral compass gradually distances her from being a straightforward antagonist. Julia Stiles, meanwhile, delivers a subtle but important performance as someone who ultimately chooses integrity over blind loyalty. While not a romantic lead, her character comes closest to filling that space in Bourne's emotionally guarded world. The film's achievements speak for themselves. It won 3 Academy Awards, 2 for sound and 1 for editing, an impressive sweep considering it received only 3 nominations. The razor-sharp editing in particular plays a major role in sustaining the film's momentum. Overall, the Bourne Ultimatum may lean heavily on action to drive its narrative forward, but it does so with precision, intelligence, and confidence. It's not just another explosion-filled blockbuster. It's a tense, well-crafted thriller that closes its trilogy with authority. They had crossed paths before the events of this film, and that history plays an important role as they once again help each other escape from those hunting them down. A standout example is Bourne's brutal confrontation with the assassin named Des. Unlike many of Bourne's previous encounters, this is not a fight he can end in seconds. Des actually gains the upper hand at one point, and it's only when Nikki steps in that the tide begins to turn. That sequence is easily one of the most memorable moments in the movie, raw, intense, and impressively choreographed. From a narrative standpoint, I had mixed feelings. The idea of Bourne desperately trying to uncover his true identity and the reason behind his memory loss is compelling in theory. However, the execution didn't entirely live up to the concept. Some of the later scenes involving Dr. Hirsch felt underwhelming to me, particularly toward the conclusion. What truly elevates the film are the individual set pieces. The London station sequence with Simon Ross, the journalist played by Paddy Considine, is a perfect example. The way Bourne guides him through the crowd, carefully instructing him to avoid detection, creates an incredible sense of tension. That's the moment where the film really kicks into high gear. Earlier, Daniel Bruhl makes a brief appearance, but unfortunately, his character feels somewhat underused. Even in the thrilling station scene, there's a slight issue. Bourne sometimes borders on being almost superhuman. His awareness, control, and ability to anticipate everything happening around him stretch believability. When Ross ultimately ignores Bourne's instructions and pays the price, it reinforces that delicate balance the film tries to maintain between realism and high-octane entertainment. At times, the thrill slightly outweighs plausibility. One detail I genuinely appreciated was the subtle parallel at the end. Seeing Bourne disappear into the water echoes the earlier tragic image of his lover drowning. It's a clever narrative bookend and adds emotional weight. Clearly, it takes more than a few bullets to finish Jason Bourne. The craftsmanship behind the film is evident throughout. The director and writers clearly know what they're doing. There are smaller touches that stand out, such as the scene where Bourne suddenly appears in Noah Vosen's office. His calm remark exposing Vosen's lie adds a surprising bit of humor, and Damon plays the moment with just enough subtlety to make it land. In fact, there are a few instances where the audience can't help but smile, though the film is far from a comedy. It's more about effortless coolness than outright jokes. Still, the realism question lingers. Would someone really be able to walk into such a highly secured agency building unnoticed? The subplot involving Neil Daniels raises similar concerns. The speed and precision with which the agency pieces together tiny details to track him feel slightly exaggerated. Moments like these prevent the film from reaching absolute greatness. Technically speaking, though, there's little to criticize. The film's awards recognition speaks volumes about its technical excellence, yet some resolutions feel rushed, particularly how certain antagonists are brought down and how conveniently some loose ends are tied up. The sniper's hesitation on the rooftop, for example, feels like a plot device to keep things moving toward a neat conclusion. Matt Damon usually brings a certain intensity and emotional weight to the role, but here I found him slightly less engaging than before. Despite its flaws, however, if you enjoyed the first two installments, this one is absolutely worth watching. It leans heavily into action and precision, perhaps appealing more to fans of gritty thrillers. While Bourne's globetrotting escapades are entertaining, they don't quite match the exotic flair of the James Bond series, which I personally find more captivating in terms of locations and style. That said, Bourne's grounded approach has its own charm. It's also interesting to think about the time of its release. When the first Bourne film premiered, social media barely existed. By the time this third installment arrived, Facebook was becoming globally dominant, Twitter had just launched, and American politics was on the brink of major change. Yet in Bourne's world, the CIA doesn't need social media to track him. They're always one step behind, but never far. The London Waterloo sequences are especially impressive from a filmmaking perspective. The scale of those scenes makes you wonder how they were even shot in such a busy location. Stories from the production reveal that commuters were cleverly misdirected during filming, which only adds to the authenticity. Watching bystanders in the background subtly react to Bourne gives those moments an extra layer of realism. In the end, while it may not be a flawless masterpiece, it remains a strong and entertaining entry in the franchise. It gets a thumbs up from me, not an overwhelmingly enthusiastic one, but a solid recommendation nonetheless. If you've followed the series this far, you'll likely want to see how this chapter unfolds. One of the film's strongest elements is how vividly it captures New York City. The energy of the Big Apple practically pulses alongside Jason Bourne as he moves through it. A particularly touching moment involves Julia Stiles' Nikki Parsons adjusting her hair while they're on the run, a small gesture that triggers a painful memory for Bourne of his slain German lover, played by Franka Potent, who appears in a haunting flashback. It's striking to think that after so many years, the character would eventually resurface again in Jason Bourne nearly a decade later. The story follows Simon Ross, a journalist from The Guardian, who publishes articles investigating Treadstone and the shadowy history of Jason Bourne. Though Ross doesn't have all the answers, his reporting hints at a powerful insider feeding him information. CIA Deputy Director Vosen is desperate to eliminate that leak, fearing exposure of covert operations worldwide. Meanwhile, Bourne, last seen disappearing in Russia, is equally determined to uncover the identity of Ross's source. What follows is a tense race, Bourne seeking clarity about his past, the CIA scrambling to bury it for good. At the time of writing, IMDb users rank this film impressively high among all-time favorites, and the acclaim has been widespread. Does it deserve every ounce of that praise? Probably not. Yet it's easy to understand why it resonated so strongly, especially during a summer crowded with underwhelming blockbusters and tired franchises. When a film delivers sharp, focused entertainment in that environment, it naturally stands out. The Bourne Ultimatum isn't a flawless masterpiece, nor is it among the greatest films ever made. What it is, however, is an exceptionally effective thriller. It's so gripping that its shortcomings become easy to overlook in the moment. Some viewers claim it has no real weaknesses, but I'd argue otherwise. The overarching narrative across the trilogy follows a fairly straightforward path with limited surprises. The structure leaves more room for action than for deep character exploration, and action is where the film truly shines. Director Paul Greengrass, along with his cinematographer, crafts a sense of relentless urgency from the opening frames. The handheld, constantly moving camera, divisive in the Bourne supremacy, returns here with purpose. For some, it may feel disorienting, but for me, it heightens immersion. The audience is pulled so tightly into the chaos that specific plot mechanics occasionally feel secondary to the immediacy of the experience. Even the intense sequence in Turin, which only loosely connects to the larger narrative, works because of how visceral it feels. That said, I did wish the story paused occasionally to explore its characters more deeply. The conclusion, while serviceable, lacks the emotional punch it could have delivered. The globetrotting scale is undeniably appealing and naturally invites comparisons to James Bond. Unlike some superficial parallels, though, this film genuinely makes its locations matter, using them to amplify tension rather than simply decorate the screen. The action sequences themselves are executed with remarkable restraint. The film doesn't rely heavily on bombastic music cues or flashy CGI. Instead, the camera work and editing create intensity organically. The New York car chase, for instance, unfolds in a setting we've seen countless times before, yet it feels fresh thanks to its raw, almost documentary-like presentation. The near-silent fistfight between Bourne and Des is another highlight, chaotic, close quarters, and brutally intimate. Performance-wise, the cast keeps things tight and grounded. Damon convincingly embodies the nearly indestructible operative, though there are moments when the script stretches credibility. There's only so many catastrophic crashes one character can survive before it strains believability. It's also unfortunate that the film rushes through the revelation that Bourne volunteered for the program. That twist, which should carry heavy moral weight, is treated almost as an afterthought, missing an opportunity to deepen the character. Julia Stiles delivers a solid, if understated, performance. David Strath, Joan Allen, and Scott Glenn bring gravitas to their CIA roles, while Paddy Considine and Albert Finney leave memorable impressions. It's not a character-driven drama, but the ensemble performs their roles efficiently and convincingly. In the end, this is a tightly constructed, highly engaging action thriller that thrives on urgency and immersive direction. It may not reach the legendary heights some have assigned to it, but it stands as one of the more satisfying blockbusters of its year, even if that particular summer set the bar relatively low. This third chapter in the saga builds powerfully on the foundation laid by the Bourne identity, directed by Doug Liman, and the Bourne supremacy, delivering a relentless continuation of Jason Bourne's search for the truth. Once again living under false identities and haunted by fractured memories, Bourne is determined to uncover the secrets of his past while evading relentless CIA operatives. This time the chase feels bigger, faster, and more urgent than ever. Jason Bourne, once again portrayed with steely focus by Matt Damon, remains trapped between survival and self-discovery. Still reeling from events in Moscow, he learns of a covert CIA initiative known as Blackbriar after an investigative journalist, Simon Ross Paddy Considine, uncovers sensitive information. Bourne sees Ross as a potential key to unlocking his past, but the CIA sees him as a liability. Deputy Director Noah Vosen, David Strath, wastes no time mobilizing his team. Surveillance systems hum, agents mobilize, and London becomes a battleground of wits and reflexes. Bourne attempts to shield Ross, but the operation spirals violently out of control. In Madrid and beyond, Bourne reconnects with Nikki Parsons, played coolly and convincingly by Julia Stiles. Once tasked with tracking him, she now becomes an unlikely ally, providing crucial intelligence that leads them to Tangier. Meanwhile, Vosen activates a highly trained operative, Des, portrayed by Joey Ansa, to eliminate loose ends. The hand-to-hand confrontation between Bourne and Des is among the most brutal and tightly choreographed sequences in the series. It's raw, breathless, and leaves little room to blink. Returning cast members, including Joan Allen as Pamela Landy, add gravitas and moral complexity. Landy's quieter presence contrasts sharply with Vosen's uncompromising pursuit. Director Paul Greengrass, who also helmed Supremacy, intensifies the handheld, documentary-style aesthetic. The kinetic camerawork by Oliver Wood throws viewers directly into the turmoil, whether in Moscow, London, Madrid, Tangier, or New York City. The rapid cuts and urgent pacing rarely allow the audience to catch its breath. Tony Gilroy's screenplay, inspired by characters created by Robert Ludlum, ties the trilogy together with narrative cohesion and thematic closure. While the plot sometimes races forward at implausible speed, jumping continents in what feels like mere hours, it sustains suspense through sharp dialogue and moral tension. Adding to the intensity is composer John Powell, whose driving score amplifies every chase and confrontation with pounding urgency. Let's be honest, much of what Bourne accomplishes stretches credibility. The near-instant globe hopping, the seamless evasion of surveillance, even driving a car off a rooftop, these moments push the boundaries of realism. Yet they're executed with such conviction that questioning them almost feels beside the point. The final act, where Bourne exposes the truth behind Blackbriar and confronts Vosen's operation, delivers a satisfying culmination. It's a payoff that rewards viewers who have followed the trilogy from the beginning. Critics widely praised this third installment, and it's easy to see why. Even if the finer details of the previous films fade from memory, this entry stands confidently on its own. It's sharp, propulsive, and emotionally grounded beneath the explosive exterior. While it may flirt with fantasy-level logistics, it never loses its grip as a gripping action thriller. If you appreciate high-velocity storytelling and tightly staged combat sequences, this chapter will not disappoint. A powerful and polished conclusion to the trilogy, intense, stylish, and well worth watching. Few action trilogies manage to stick the landing, but the Bourne Ultimatum does exactly that, delivering a tense, high-speed conclusion to Jason Bourne's search for the truth. Directed once again by Paul Greengrass, the film picks up mere minutes after the events of the Bourne supremacy, wasting no time throwing us back into the chaos. Matt Damon returns as Bourne, still hunted and still haunted, but now closer than ever to discovering who he really is. When a newspaper article exposes a covert CIA program known as Blackbriar, an evolution of Treadstone, Bourne realizes the answers he's been chasing may finally be within reach. After spotting his own name in the report, he tracks down the journalist involved, triggering a relentless international pursuit. Back in the US, CIA operative Noah Vosen, David Strath, believes Bourne has turned traitor and pushes aggressively to eliminate him. Pamela Landy, Joan Allen, however, suspects Bourne is not the villain he's painted to be. As agencies close in, Bourne races from Moscow to London's Waterloo Station, one of the film's most nerve-wracking sequences, and onward through Europe and North Africa in a series of tightly choreographed chases and confrontations. The film gradually reveals the truth. Bourne's real name is David Webb. In a pivotal phone call, Landy confirms his identity and even slips him a critical clue hidden within his birth date. Eventually, Bourne confronts Dr. Albert Hirsch, Albert Finney, the architect behind the Treadstone program, who claims Bourne willingly signed up for the brutal conditioning that erased his former self. The climax is classic Bourne, tense, physical, and emotionally charged. In a final showdown, Bourne appears to be fatally wounded and plunges into the ocean. Authorities arrest both Vosen and Hirsch for their roles in the operation, yet true to form, Bourne vanishes, leaving the door symbolically open while giving the trilogy a satisfying sense of closure. The supporting cast, including Edgar Ramirez as the persistent assassin Paz, Scott Glenn as CIA Director Ezra Kramer, and Julia Stiles reprising her role as Nikki Parsons, adds depth without distracting from the central momentum. Greengrass' signature handheld camera style returns, occasionally shaky but always immersive, placing viewers right inside the action. The chase scenes, especially the Tangier rooftop pursuit and the explosive New York car chase, are staged with clarity and urgency, avoiding the bloated excess common in many action franchises. Despite the complex plot threads involving intelligence leaks and covert programs, the storytelling remains gripping rather than confusing. Critically, the film was a major success. It earned Academy Awards for Best Film Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Sound Editing, winning every Oscar for which it was nominated. At the BAFTAs, it took home awards for Best Editing and Best Sound, along with nominations in several other categories. Perhaps the best measure of its effectiveness is simple: it never feels slow. The tension barely lets up, and the pacing keeps you invested from start to finish. Like its predecessors, it blends intelligence with adrenaline, making it one of the rare trilogies where the third installment stands shoulder to shoulder with the first two. Based loosely on the novels by Robert Ludlum, the Bourne films have carved out a distinct identity in modern action cinema. With the Bourne Ultimatum, the journey feels complete. Bourne finds his name, confronts his past, and ultimately chooses his own future. A sharp, breathless thriller, and a worthy finale to an exceptional trilogy. There's an outstanding sequence where Bourne skillfully dodges the team hunting him through a crowded cityscape, a tense, tightly executed chase that reminds you why the character became so iconic in the first place. Sadly, a journalist who crosses his path isn't nearly as fortunate. Julia Stiles returns as Nikki Parsons, once again portraying the loyal insider who understands Bourne's predicament and chooses to stand beside him. David Strath delivers his usual steady performance as CIA Deputy Director Noah Vosen, while Scott Glenn appears as CIA Director Ezra Kramer. Albert Finney plays Dr. Albert Hirsch, the architect behind the shadowy program that molded Bourne into what he is. Joan Allen reprises her role as Pamela Landy, serving as a moral counterweight to Vosen's ruthless determination to erase anyone who could expose the operation. Taken on its own, it's a slick, fast-paced thriller that rewards repeat viewings, especially if spaced out over time. Matt Damon has so thoroughly embodied Jason Bourne that it's nearly impossible to picture another actor stepping into the role. That said, despite boasting an impressive lineup, Damon, Glenn, Allen, Strath, the film at times feels like it squanders its talent in favor of commercial spectacle. The franchise began with the Bourne identity, which was gritty, intelligent, and driven by a compelling central mystery. Who exactly is Jason Bourne? The revelation that he is a trained operative from a covert CIA program, now suffering from amnesia and hunted by the very organization that created him, gave the story weight and urgency. The action felt purposeful, and the plot had momentum. The follow-up installment leaned more heavily into chaos, and unfortunately this chapter doubles down on that approach. Once again, shadowy government figures are determined to eliminate Bourne simply because he represents a lingering liability. We've seen this formula countless times, one hyper-capable protagonist outsmarting waves of heavily armed pursuers. It's a structure familiar from decades of action cinema. The film opens with a sweeping aerial view of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, an instantly recognizable landmark, followed by a caption clarifying the location as Paris, France, as though audiences might mistake it for somewhere else. It's a small but telling example of the film's heavy-handedness. There's no shortage of action here. Fistfights erupt, bodies crash into walls and windows, vehicles collide spectacularly. If relentless physical confrontation is what you're after, the movie delivers in abundance, though sometimes at the expense of deeper storytelling. The musical score echoes themes from earlier entries, reinforcing continuity but offering little innovation. Perhaps the most divisive element is the cinematography. The decision to rely extensively on handheld camera work creates an intentionally raw feel, but it often borders on disorienting. During a key cafe conversation early in the film, instead of using steady over-the-shoulder shots to anchor the dialogue, the camera wanders unpredictably. Faces drift partially out of frame. At one point, a character's head nearly blocks the entire view of Damon, leaving only fragments of his expression visible. Later, the camera angle dips so low and shifts so erratically that the audience is left staring at the back of someone's neck during an important exchange. Rather than heightening realism, the effect can feel distracting and unnecessarily chaotic. Ultimately, the film delivers high-octane entertainment and showcases Damon's total command of the character. Yet its stylistic choices and reliance on familiar action tropes may leave some viewers wishing it had recaptured more of the tight storytelling and measured intensity that made the first installment so compelling. I'll be honest. At several points during this movie, I was genuinely concerned for the survival of my visual cortex, and possibly my frontal lobes too. And yet, judging by the impressively high audience ratings, this film clearly satisfies some kind of craving out there. I won't speculate on what that craving is, but I do have one sincere question for those who praise it so enthusiastically. Did you watch the original Bourne film? To clarify where I'm coming from, I genuinely enjoyed the first installment, The Bourne Identity, and I thought the Bourne supremacy elevated the series with tighter direction and stronger tension. So I approached the third entry with anticipation. I did delay watching it for a while after hearing claims that it leaned heavily into anti-American themes. When I finally saw it, though, I didn't find the political undertones any more pronounced than in the earlier films. That aspect didn't bother me. What disappointed me was something much simpler. It just wasn't a particularly good movie. Apparently, I'm not alone in that feeling. Many viewers have pointed out that watching this film can be physically exhausting, and I completely agree. Director Paul Greengrass doubles down on the handheld camera technique here, but instead of enhancing realism, it often becomes distracting. The constant horizontal and vertical shaking during action sequences makes some scenes borderline unwatchable. I'm usually tolerant of kinetic camera work, but there were moments I had to glance away just to rest my eyes. That kind of strain pulls you out of the experience rather than immersing you in it. Beyond the visual chaos, the story itself offers very little that feels fresh. With the exception of the ending, most of the narrative beats feel recycled from the previous two films. We're essentially watching variations of the same pursuit and escape formula. Worse still, the action stretches credibility to a breaking point. Bourne was once a highly trained operative with impressive survival skills. Now he seems almost superhuman, effortlessly evading entire metropolitan police forces on foot, by car, and by motorcycle. Instead of suspense, these sequences generate disbelief. When the stakes feel artificial, the tension evaporates. Some of the supporting characters don't fare much better. The dynamic between the morally upright female official and the predictably corrupt male superior feels overly familiar. While the performances are competent, the characterizations lack nuance. The political undertones are present, but they're subtle enough not to dominate the story. If anything, they feel more like background flavoring than a central theme. All things considered, I couldn't help thinking the trilogy might have benefited from consolidation. Expanding the previous installment slightly to wrap up Bourne's journey may have spared audiences this visually overwhelming epilogue. That said, the trilogy undeniably has a large and devoted fan base, particularly for this third chapter. And to be fair, not everything falls flat. certain sequences are undeniably well executed. The rooftop pursuit in Morocco, culminating in a brutal, close-quarters fight, is choreographed with precision and intensity. There are also intriguing hints of deeper conspiracies within intelligence agencies, suggesting layers of secrecy behind Bourne's past. Yet emotionally, the film feels undercooked. The character interactions lack the depth needed to ground the spectacle. Matt Damon delivers a restrained performance, but his portrayal remains largely one note until the final scenes. The production itself reportedly faced challenges, including shooting without a finalized script, which may explain the uneven cohesion. Even talented filmmakers can struggle when structure and clarity are missing. It's important to note that handheld cinematography isn't inherently flawed. In the right context, as seen in Greengrass's United 93, it can heighten realism and tension beautifully. Here, however, the technique feels excessive, overwhelming the story rather than supporting it. In the end, the Bourne Ultimatum has flashes of brilliance, but they're buried beneath frantic camera work, repetitive plotting, and an emotional core that never fully develops. For some viewers, that adrenaline-fueled chaos is thrilling. For me, it was simply exhausting. There's no denying that the third chapter in the Bourne saga maintains the franchise's signature urgency. Picking up immediately where the Bourne supremacy left off, the story wastes no time plunging us back into the chaos. Jason Bourne is still running, still hunted, but now more than ever, he's determined to uncover the truth about who he was before becoming a ghost in his own life. Director Paul Greengrass, once again, relies heavily on handheld camera work. While this technique previously enhanced the raw, documentary-like tension of the series, here it occasionally feels overused. Even quiet exchanges, like characters scanning files or exchanging looks, are shot with restless movement. What once felt immersive now sometimes borders on repetitive. That said, the action sequences remain impressively staged. The New York pursuit scenes, in particular, are tightly choreographed and pulse with intensity. The film operates in near-constant chase mode, rarely allowing the audience a moment to breathe. Bourne endures an almost superhuman level of punishment, collisions, brutal fights, dizzying falls, yet escapes with little more than bruised knuckles. It's thrilling, if slightly exaggerated. If the shaky camera occasionally distracts, it's still more tolerable than the stylized flashback sequences. These first-person memory fragments attempt to place us inside Bourne's fractured mind, but the hazy, distorted visuals sometimes resemble a surreal fever dream rather than meaningful recollection. The narrative centers on Bourne's pursuit of his erased past. Headaches and fleeting memories guide him toward buried secrets tied to Operation Blackbriar, a covert program rooted in the aftermath of Treadstone. The conspiracy unfolds through familiar espionage territory, government cover-ups, shifting loyalties, and strategic betrayals among key players. While the structure follows recognizable patterns of the spy genre, it remains compelling due to the emotional stakes attached to Bourne's identity crisis. The trilogy's continuity is particularly impressive. Though inspired by the novels of Robert Ludlum, the films chart their own path, functioning as tightly constructed standalone entries that interlock seamlessly. This installment even reframes moments from earlier chapters, subtly altering how we interpret past events. Matt Damon, actor, continues to ground the film with a restrained yet intense performance. His portrayal of Bourne is understated, measured glances, calculated movements, quiet determination. Nothing feels theatrical. Every reaction seems instinctive, as if we're experiencing each discovery alongside him. Much credit also belongs to Tony Gilroy, whose screenplay weaves together thematic elements introduced in the Bourne identity and its sequel. References to past operations and figures, like Ward Abbott, create a layered sense of closure. The script smartly balances action with introspection, ensuring the emotional arc never gets lost amid the explosions. While not flawless, the Bourne Ultimatum succeeds in delivering a focused and largely satisfying conclusion to one of modern cinema's most cohesive trilogies. It may not reinvent the genre in its final act, nor does it fully escape stylistic excess, but its momentum, intelligence, and commitment to character keep it firmly above the average blockbuster. It's neither the absolute peak nor the weakest entry in the summer lineup of 2007, but as a finale to Bourne's journey, it stands as a gripping, muscular piece of action filmmaking that respects both its audience and its protagonist. At the conclusion of the Bourne supremacy, it appeared that Jason Bourne had finally slipped beyond the reach of the CIA. A restrained, distant exchange between him and his relentless pursuer, Pamela Landy, suggested closure. Yet in the shadowy universe of covert operations, nothing is ever as straightforward as it seems. That quiet moment was merely another layer of misdirection. What truly sets the Bourne Ultimatum apart is its shift in perspective. Instead of relying solely on spectacle, the film deepens its characters, something increasingly rare in modern action cinema. Bourne is not portrayed as an untouchable action icon. He bleeds, he doubts. He carries the burden of moral conflict. Haunted by the loss of the woman he loved and stripped of his own identity, he moves through the world with visible emotional scars. Every life he has taken weighs on him, compounding the damage done by a past that remains frustratingly incomplete. The screenplay by Tony Gilroy, Scott Z. Burns, and George Nolfi thrives on the psychological chess match between Bourne and those hunting him. Orders from intelligence agencies are not enough. Survival demands anticipation. Bourne must predict moves before they happen, reacting in split seconds while staying perpetually ahead. This intellectual tension elevates the film beyond a standard thriller, making it equally satisfying for audiences seeking both high-stakes action and narrative complexity. Matt Damon once again anchors the story with a measured and compelling performance. Beyond portraying Bourne's search for answers, he subtly hints at fragments of the man's former self, giving emotional texture to a character often defined by movement and violence. Julia Stiles returns as Nikki Parsons, and though her entrance into the story is sudden, her role proves crucial. The film cleverly mirrors some of her moments with echoes of Marie's presence in the first installment, suggesting deeper, possibly unspoken ties between Nikki and Bourne's earlier life. Joan Allen adds further depth to Pamela Landy, presenting her as a figure caught between professional duty and personal conscience. Meanwhile, David Strathairn's Noah Vosen embodies a different kind of antagonist. Rather than greed or ego, his motivations are rooted in an uncompromising belief in national security, a recurring theme among those who oppose Bourne. Director Paul Greengrass faces the difficult task of surpassing his own achievement in the Bourne supremacy, and he succeeds impressively. He handles the intricate narrative with clarity while delivering two action sequences that instantly feel iconic. The pursuit through Tangier unfolds across multiple levels of space and tension, showcasing Greengrass's kinetic camera work. This is later rivaled by the explosive car chase in New York, a chaotic crescendo that brings the trilogy to a powerful climax. Few franchises embrace global movement as effectively as this one. The story travels seamlessly across continents, from Moscow to Paris, London to Madrid, Tangier to New York, reflecting the fluid identity of a spy who changes borders as easily as passports. A key thread begins in Turin, where fragments of Bourne's history start to surface through a journalist's investigation. That trail leads to one of the film's most masterfully constructed sequences at London's Waterloo Station, where Bourne must coordinate a meeting while simultaneously evading an assassin closing in. Greengrass, alongside his writing team, crafts a spy thriller that respects its audience. The film refuses to oversimplify its plot or rely solely on digital spectacle. Instead, it trusts viewers to follow its intricate design. Much credit is owed to cinematographer Oliver Wood, editor Christopher Rouse, whose precise pacing injects urgency into even the quietest scenes, and sound editor Christopher Assels, whose work heightens the immersive tension throughout. In the end, the Bourne Ultimatum stands as a rare example of blockbuster filmmaking that balances intellect, emotion, and adrenaline with remarkable precision. From its opening frames, the Bourne Ultimatum wastes no time. The film throws us straight into motion, no reintroductions, no hesitation. We already know who Jason Bourne is, what he was turned into, and what he lost. This time, there's no origin story to unpack. It's pure pursuit, pure revelation, and relentless action. Director Paul Greengrass once again leans into the franchise's signature visual style. The handheld camera work is restless and intimate, with tight zooms that heighten every burst of tension. The editing is sharp and urgent, occasionally rough around the edges, but intentionally so. That raw construction mirrors Bourne's fractured psyche. The film sounds alive too, street noise, distant sirens, echoing footsteps. The layered sound design adds grit and authenticity, giving the action a documentary-like immediacy. It's no surprise the film was recognized at the Academy Awards for its achievements in editing and sound craftsmanship. The pulse of the movie is further driven by composer John Powell. His score rarely lets up. The music surges and tightens around each chase and confrontation, pushing the audience into the same breathless state as the protagonist. The tension never truly fades, it only shifts. If earlier installments showed Bourne as vulnerable and battered, this chapter sharpens him into something nearly unstoppable. He still takes hits, he still bleeds. But compared to his condition at the end of the Bourne supremacy, where he limped away broken and exhausted, here he walks away from explosions, brutal fistfights, and car wrecks with surprisingly minor damage. It slightly tilts him toward near-superhuman territory, which may divide some viewers. Still, what makes the franchise stand apart is its grounded tone. The Bourne series redefined modern action cinema, injecting intelligence and political tension into a genre often dominated by spectacle alone. Even the reinvention of Casino Royale owes something to Bourne's stripped-down realism and emotional edge. One of the film's most intriguing developments is the evolution of Nikki Parsons, played by Julia Stiles. Once a CIA operative tied to the very system hunting Bourne, she makes a dramatic choice. She helps him. This isn't a small act of rebellion. By siding with Bourne, she effectively brands herself a traitor, putting her own life at permanent risk. She doesn't just step in front of danger, she steps away from her career, her security, and any normal future. That decision suggests deeper emotional undercurrents. Nikki hints that Bourne's situation was always complicated for her, implying history that runs deeper than professional overlap. Is that enough to justify risking everything? That question lingers. Her loyalty adds emotional stakes, but it also introduces vulnerability. Even someone as skilled as Bourne can't shield everyone forever. Instead of Treadstone, the shadow program now operating is Blackbriar. Instead of one handler, another. The names change, but the structure remains. A powerful intelligence machine scrambling to bury its secrets while one former operative fights to expose them. Bourne's mission here is less about survival and more about clarity. He wants the final pieces of his past, the architects behind the conditioning, the people who erased his identity. The narrative is streamlined. No unnecessary subplots, no filler dialogue. Every scene pushes the story forward. Despite its 2-hour runtime, the pacing never drags. The handheld cinematography intensifies the realism without becoming disorienting. Unlike some shaky cam experiments of the era, the action remains coherent. You feel the chaos, but you're never lost in it. The Bourne trilogy restored maturity to big-budget action films. It combined cerebral storytelling with kinetic spectacle in a way that reshaped the genre. The Bourne Ultimatum serves as a powerful conclusion to Jason Bourne's search for identity, at least for this chapter of his life. Whether the story continues or not is always up to the studio, but as a closing act, this film lands with impact, tight, intelligent, and electrifying from start to finish. The musical score deserves special praise. It heightens the tension, drives the pace, and sustains the suspense throughout. Refreshingly, the film avoids unnecessary romantic subplots or gratuitous sex scenes meant to pad the runtime. That restraint keeps the focus exactly where it belongs, on delivering a tightly constructed action thriller. One aspect of the Bourne trilogy that simply cannot be overlooked is its heavy reliance on the shaky cam technique. For viewers sensitive to motion sickness, this artistic choice can be maddening. While they may represent a minority of moviegoers, it's a vocal and passionate one. These viewers often express intense frustration with the constantly swaying, darting, restless camera movements. On the other hand, the majority of fans and critics either appreciate the style or at least tolerate it, accepting it as part of the series' identity. This award-winning conclusion to the trilogy is once again directed by Paul Greengrass, who has practically turned the jittery handheld aesthetic into his trademark. Tony Gilroy also plays a significant role in shaping the screenplay. Matt Damon is backed by a formidable supporting cast including Joan Allen, David Strath, Julia Stiles, Scott Glenn, and Albert Finney. It's a lineup that brings weight and credibility to every scene. Ultimately, the Bourne series boils down to this. If you can embrace, or at least withstand, the floating, kinetic camera work, you're in for an intense and highly entertaining ride. If you can't, it may be best to skip it altogether. Thankfully, the shaky cam craze appears to have been more of a passing trend than a permanent cinematic shift. All three films share the same DNA: high-tech visuals, restless camera energy, and an atmosphere drenched in surveillance paranoia and institutional overreach. The series earned both commercial success and critical acclaim. So with those caveats in mind, you likely already know which side you fall on before stepping into the restless, fragmented world of David Webb, better known as Jason Bourne. Interestingly, I found myself asking why I enjoyed Transformers more than this installment, despite their similar visual intensity. At their core, both rely on heightened, frenetic cinematic engineering. Yet Transformers feels simpler and more cohesive. Because it embraces its cartoonish, battle-driven identity, the style aligns more naturally with the story. Here, the approach feels more grafted on. Director Doug Liman studied how visual rhythm can manipulate the eye, amplifying standard action techniques into something more aggressive. The influence of Tony Scott is evident, right down to the teletype-style location graphics accompanied by sharp audio cues. That device feels dated and distracting, much like the old red line moving across a map effect from earlier thrillers. Even in quieter scenes, the handheld style reminds us of its presence. The camera never truly rests. At times, the movement feels almost artificially generated, as if a machine were simulating randomness rather than a human operator responding organically. During fight sequences, however, the effect can be immersive. The flashes of motion mirror what the characters might see in chaos. Chase scenes capture the blurred, peripheral disorientation of pursuit, borrowing energy from sequences reminiscent of Casino Royale. Still, there's a disconnect. The Bourne story revolves around fragmented memory and gradual self-discovery, yet the hyperactive visual style doesn't always complement that theme. Films like The Manchurian Candidate used visual distortion to reinforce memory manipulation in a way that felt integrated. Here, the modern technique sometimes feels bolted on, similar to how the groundbreaking car chase in The French Connection once felt revolutionary, but now shows its age. That said, in the moment, the film delivers an undeniable adrenaline rush. Scott Glenn stands out with a solid performance, though much of the remaining cast functions more as narrative support than fully fleshed-out characters. For anyone seeking a couple of hours of relentless, fast-paced action, the Bourne Ultimatum remains a strong choice. Just make sure you're ready for the ride, steady camera not included. Inspired by Robert Ludlum's best-selling novel, this high-octane thriller delivers exactly what fans of espionage dramas and adrenaline-fueled cinema expect. Under the direction of Paul Greengrass, the story races across multiple international cities, tracking former CIA operative Jason Bourne as he searches desperately for answers about his past. Along the way, he becomes the target of the very agency that engineered him. The screenplay, shaped by Tony Gilroy, who previously worked on earlier installments of the franchise, as well as the acclaimed Michael Clayton, presents a gripping and intelligent foundation. Contributions from George Nolfi and Scott Z. Burns further tighten the narrative, creating a layered and fast-moving plot. Bourne stands out as one of modern action cinema's most compelling figures, resourceful, relentless, and perpetually one move ahead of those hunting him. The trouble begins when Bourne attempts to connect with a journalist from the British newspaper The Guardian. CIA executive Noah Vosen intercepts the situation and dispatches a deadly team to eliminate Bourne at London's bustling Waterloo station. From that point forward, the film rarely slows down, pulling viewers into a relentless chase that barely allows time to breathe. Matt Damon fits seamlessly into the role of Jason Bourne. While he may shine differently in other genres, as an action lead he radiates quiet intensity and composure. Even in moments of extreme danger, he maintains a calm, calculating presence that defines the character. David Strathairn brings controlled menace to the role of Vosen, portraying the CIA chief with chilling authority. Joan Allen plays a crucial, if somewhat restrained, role that ultimately proves vital to Bourne's mission. Supporting performances by Julia Stiles, Scott Glenn, Paddy Considine, and Albert Finney are brief but effective. Visually, the film benefits from Oliver Wood's sharp cinematography, which captures every cityscape and action sequence with precision. Christopher Rouse's Academy award-winning editing heightens the urgency, while John Powell's dynamic score underscores the tension and emotional beats. Ultimately, much of the credit belongs to Greengrass, whose kinetic style and sharp storytelling transform this installment into a memorable action thriller that lingers long after the credits roll. If the Bourne supremacy left audiences breathless with its mounting tension, then the Bourne Ultimatum pushes that intensity even further across its tight 115-minute runtime. Often considered the final chapter in Jason Bourne's cinematic journey, the film echoes the political paranoia thrillers of the 1970s, reminiscent of classics like 3 Days of the Condor, Scorpio, and The Killer Elite. There are a few things viewers should keep in mind before watching. First, stepping away even briefly may result in missing key pieces of the intricately constructed storyline, which builds steadily toward a thrilling car chase climax. Second, Greengrass maintains a brisk, almost breathless pace as the narrative jumps between Europe and the United States, layering information rapidly and keeping audiences constantly engaged. Finally, newcomers who haven't seen the earlier films may struggle to follow the complex internal power struggles within the CIA, as the story assumes familiarity with prior events. In the end, this installment stands as a gripping and intelligent espionage film, one that combines action, political undertones, and character depth into a satisfying conclusion for one of cinema's most iconic modern spies. One of the interesting aspects of the Bourne Ultimatum is how tightly it connects to the earlier films in the trilogy. Early on, we're reminded of a taped confession that originally appeared toward the end of the second movie, following the suicide of CIA official Ward Abbott. Revisiting the Bourne supremacy makes it clear just how seamlessly Ultimatum picks up the story, almost in mid-motion, with Jason Bourne limping away from an assassin he has just defeated. At the conclusion of Supremacy, Bourne sought out the daughter of a Russian couple he had been ordered to eliminate during his time as a government-trained killer. He offered a heartfelt apology, admitting that the woman, her mother, had walked in unexpectedly and was killed as well. In Ultimatum, Bourne continues this path of reckoning by visiting the brother of his former girlfriend, Marie, to express remorse for the part he played in her death. It's a rare moment of vulnerability before the plot accelerates again. Soon afterward, Bourne learns of a British journalist who might hold critical clues about his true identity. From there, the film shifts into high-tech pursuit mode, echoing the paranoid surveillance thrillers of the late 90s. A single word spoken over a cell phone triggers a cascade of CIA monitoring systems, locking onto the unsuspecting reporter. The term refers to a covert operation that has replaced the earlier Treadstone program, the shadowy initiative that molded Bourne into a lethal operative. The primary antagonist this time is a relentless CIA Black Ops chief determined to protect classified secrets at any cost. If eliminating a reporter is what it takes, so be it. When Bourne makes contact with the journalist, he is instantly branded a threat, and orders are issued to neutralize him without hesitation. Familiar faces return as well. Nikki Parsons briefly aligns herself with Bourne during his escape, but she's portrayed as capable and composed rather than reduced to a helpless bystander. She participates in the action with clarity and competence before exiting the narrative. Another CIA official, Pam Landy, reappears as a voice of cautious reason within the agency. Unlike her hardline superior, she believes Bourne deserves answers rather than a bullet. Predictably, her perspective clashes with the shoot-first mentality dominating the operation. Director Paul Greengrass maintains the raw, immediate style he established in the previous installment. The film unfolds like a high-speed collision you can't look away from, tense, controlled, and relentless. Bourne isn't a gadget-dependent super spy in the James Bond mold. Instead, he relies on instinct, improvisation, and razor-sharp awareness to survive. He uses everyday objects and split-second timing to outmaneuver enemies, giving the action a grounded intensity. The fight scenes are brutal and physical, close-quarters struggles that feel heavy and exhausting. Greengrass employs handheld camera work to heighten the urgency, making viewers feel embedded in the chaos. Even moments like crashing through glass panels land with visceral impact, amplified more by sound design than graphic imagery. Gunfire erupts frequently, but the violence serves the story rather than overwhelming it with spectacle. Car chases, shootouts, and hand-to-hand combat all push the narrative forward without descending into digital excess. That said, the film's aggressive editing style may divide audiences. Rapid cuts and constantly shifting camera angles sometimes make it difficult to focus on a single image. The same jittery, documentary-inspired technique Greengrass used in United 93 reappears here, giving the film grit but occasionally sacrificing visual clarity for momentum. Overall, the Bourne Ultimatum stands as a serious, tightly constructed action thriller. It strips away glamour in favor of urgency, keeping its resilient protagonist on the run through a maze of danger and moral reckoning. While it may lack humor and visual steadiness at times, it delivers a tense and relentless conclusion to Bourne's search for identity. This time around, the formula doesn't quite land the way it should. The tempo is undeniably brisk, but the downside is that barely any scene is allowed to breathe before the camera darts somewhere else. The rapid-fire editing feels designed for viewers who crave relentless momentum and ultra-slick pacing. However, when a film leans almost entirely on quick cuts to generate excitement, it can become draining well before the credits roll. The portrayal of the CIA borders on fantasy. Agents are shown as flawless operators, cracking complex codes in seconds, tracking targets in real time on glowing monitors, and retrieving full biographies with a single keystroke. It all plays out like a technological fairy tale. If intelligence work were really this seamless and omniscient, the world would be a far safer place. The film asks the audience to accept that information flows instantly and flawlessly within the agency, a stretch that's difficult to fully buy into. Despite these flaws, the movie manages to stay engaging largely because of Matt Damon's commanding presence as Jason Bourne. He moves through each confrontation with focused intensity, delivering the physicality and conviction you'd expect from a top-tier action lead. Julia Stiles, on the other hand, feels somewhat restrained and understated in her role, never quite matching Damon's urgency. The soundtrack, driven by an explosive score from composer John Powell, underscores nearly every moment with pounding force. While energetic, it rarely allows for subtlety, amplifying the action to the point of excess. In summary, this could have been a solid, tightly wound thriller if it hadn't leaned so heavily on jittery camera work and hyperactive editing that often blur the action instead of clarifying it. As a spy thriller, it's serviceable, but hardly groundbreaking. Given the intense marketing push, its commercial success seems more tied to hype than innovation. That said, there's another way to look at this installment. As the second chapter directed by Paul Greengrass in the Jason Bourne saga, it arguably represents the series at its peak. It's an electrifying, high-adrenaline ride that delivers precisely what it promises. While earlier entries impressed with standout set pieces, this chapter feels more cohesive overall. One of the most notable strengths is the screenplay's structure, not just within the single film, but across the trilogy as a whole. Character arcs and narrative threads evolve thoughtfully, with subtle setups and lingering questions that carry from one film to the next. The expanded role of the CIA insider character adds a compelling layer, particularly in the tense psychological duel between her and a calculating rival within the agency. Their quiet power struggle offers a welcome contrast to the chaos on the streets. Although it may not feature a car chase as technically dazzling as the previous installment, the rooftop pursuit through Tangier's winding alleys is pulse-pounding and memorable. It stands out as one of the franchise's most gripping sequences. Overall, this ranks among the more exhilarating action films of its era. The storyline may not break new ground, but Greengrass demonstrates remarkable control over tight, close-quarters action and sprawling chase scenes alike. Damon continues to embody Bourne with rare authenticity. It's one of those uncommon instances where actor and character feel inseparable. The supporting cast brings added weight, with several new faces delivering strong performances. Not every returning character leaves a lasting impression, but the moral ambiguity at the heart of the story remains one of the franchise's most intriguing qualities. Bourne himself is a prime example. A man shaped by a shadowy past, capable of violence, yet someone the audience can't help but root for. This installment offers further clarity about his history while doubling down on the relentless action that defines the series. I haven't explored the original novels, but it's clear that these films chart their own path, using the source material more as inspiration than strict blueprint. This film is pure cinematic adrenaline. From the opening scene to the final shot, it rarely slows down and never loses its grip. The intensity is relentless, but in the best possible way. The action here feels elevated, larger in scale and sharper in execution than anything that came before it. While it builds on familiar elements from earlier entries in the franchise, it reinvents them with a refreshing confidence that makes everything feel new again. The fight sequences, gun battles, and high-speed chases are staged with remarkable precision. Every movement feels intentional, every collision impactful. Interestingly, the handheld camera style, previously criticized for being disorienting, feels much more controlled this time around. Whether it's refined direction or simply better balance, it enhances the urgency without becoming distracting. The globetrotting aspect returns in full force, delivering stunning international backdrops that add texture and realism. Each setting feels alive and immersive, giving the story a dynamic, expansive scope. The stunt work throughout is jaw-dropping and impressively grounded. Narratively, the film weaves together the trilogy's threads into a cohesive and satisfying conclusion. The story unfolds at a rapid pace, yet it never feels overwhelming. There's just enough breathing room between the chaos to let the tension sink in. Suspense is genuine and sustained throughout. Remarkably, newcomers could follow the story without feeling lost or burdened by excessive recap. Performances across the board are strong. The returning cast brings depth and familiarity, while the new additions blend seamlessly into the narrative. The characters feel fully realized, and the emotional beats land effectively, though the first film might still hold a slight edge in raw emotional impact. Compared to its predecessor, this installment is clearer and easier to track, yet more layered than the original 2002 entry. The musical score once again heightens every moment, complementing the film's urgency and atmosphere. For home viewers, the DVD release includes deleted and extended scenes, multiple behind-the-scenes featurettes, and an engaging director's commentary that provides valuable insight into the filmmaking process. I wholeheartedly recommend this to fans of the series and anyone who appreciates expertly crafted action cinema. It stands as one of the strongest entries in modern action filmmaking. In a summer packed with third installments from major franchises, this one rises above the rest. No need to wait for comparisons. Few action protagonists can match the intensity and resilience of Jason Bourne. As one character aptly notes, he's the most formidable target imaginable, exceptionally skilled at surviving, and even more dangerous when underestimated. Director Paul Greengrass further cements his reputation as a master of grounded, high-stakes action. His direction keeps the tension razor-sharp and the momentum constant. Matt Damon once again fully embodies Jason Bourne. His performance anchors the film, capturing both the physicality and vulnerability of the character. Time and again, just when it seems like Bourne has reached his limit, he adapts and pushes forward. Supporting performances are equally impressive, adding gravitas and credibility to the unfolding drama. Revisiting this final chapter of the original Bourne trilogy for the first time was an immensely satisfying experience. As a conclusion, it delivers everything fans could hope for. Heightened stakes, expertly crafted action, meaningful character development, and a powerful payoff. Simply put, this stands among the finest action films ever made. The showdown between Jason Bourne and Des Bauxani is easily one of the most intense and memorable fights in the entire franchise. It's brutal, raw, and stripped down in a way that perfectly represents what these films do best. At the same time, the truth Bourne has been chasing finally comes to light, and those revelations hit hard. The flashbacks aren't just there for exposition, they carry emotional weight. You genuinely feel Bourne's pain, confusion, and ultimate realization. There's a powerful sense of closure that runs through these moments, as if the character is finally confronting the last missing piece of his identity. I also appreciated how the film wraps things up. Instead of ending with an over-the-top explosion or some exaggerated action spectacle, it closes on a quieter, more reflective note. The exposure of Operation Blackbriar and the arrest of the man responsible gives the story a grounded resolution. It feels earned and thematically appropriate, especially for a trilogy that has always focused more on identity and accountability than pure spectacle. That said, there are a few mixed elements worth mentioning. While they didn't ruin the experience for me, they're noticeable. Paul Greengrass' signature handheld camera work can be overwhelming at times. The constant shaky cam occasionally borders on distracting, and I did feel it during certain scenes. However, the gripping narrative kept me invested enough to overlook that stylistic choice. Another point is that, even though this film works perfectly as the conclusion to the Bourne trilogy, it didn't remain the final chapter. Universal decided to continue the franchise with additional installments. While I understand the appeal of expanding a successful series, I personally would have preferred if this had been the definitive ending. Letting the story rest here would have preserved its impact. Even Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass had mentioned for years that they felt Bourne's journey had reached its natural conclusion, and I tend to agree. Overall, the Bourne Ultimatum feels like a near-perfect conclusion to a trilogy and a strong farewell to one of the most influential action franchises in modern cinema. One of the most fascinating aspects of these films is how they turned everyday objects, like magazines, books, or even a towel, into effective weapons. In many ways, the Bourne series reshaped the action genre by daring to be grounded, practical, and different from the flashy blockbuster norm. Still, when looking at the trilogy as a whole, this entry feels like the weakest of the three. By this point, the formula starts to show. The structure mirrors the earlier films closely, especially the Bourne supremacy, and parts of the timeline even overlap with events from that movie. Once again, Bourne is being hunted by an assassin, while high-ranking officials attempt to eliminate him to protect their secret operations. The repetition becomes hard to ignore. Fast editing and restless camera work don't automatically make for great action. While the style adds urgency and momentum, it sometimes feels excessive. Greengrass already leaned heavily into this approach in the Bourne supremacy, and here it's amplified even more. The technique works well in certain grounded or documentary-style projects, like Bloody Sunday, but applying that same aesthetic across an entire high-stakes action thriller can blur the line between realism and visual fatigue. The gritty visual tone also becomes so consistent that different cities start to lose their distinct identities. Madrid, New York, Moscow, and Tangier all share a similar palette and texture, which flattens the sense of place. A bit more variation in visual style might have helped the locations feel more unique and memorable. Interestingly, when you break it down, the movie isn't packed with non-stop action in the traditional sense. There aren't endless explosions or massive set pieces. The real issue lies in the simplicity of the story. The narrative itself is very straightforward, almost minimalistic, and often takes a backseat to the action sequences. While this approach works in maintaining pace and tension, it can also feel like the film relies heavily on style to carry substance. And that ultimately raises the big question. Does it deliver a truly satisfying conclusion to the trilogy? For me, emotionally, it does, but structurally and creatively, it plays things a bit too safe. In my view, not really, because I don't see much that suggests Bourne's life has truly changed. After everything he's endured, it's hard to imagine him settling into a peaceful, ordinary existence. Some scars don't fade that easily. One of the biggest beneficiaries of this trilogy is undoubtedly Matt Damon. Before stepping into Bourne's shoes, he carried a somewhat soft-spoken, almost studious screen persona. His career seemed to be drifting a little before the first film revitalized it. Since then, he's earned widespread respect from critics and audiences alike, proving he can command high-intensity action while remaining a believable and grounded leading man. Joan Allen makes a welcome return here, as does Julia Stiles, though, if I'm being honest, her character feels like it had run its course earlier in the series. The addition of David Strath, Scott Glenn, and Albert Finney brings fresh weight and credibility to the cast. This final chapter is sleek, fast-moving, and visually sharp, a polished action thriller that serves as a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. The film is relentlessly gripping from beginning to end, delivering a pulse-pounding ride that rarely pauses for breath. It transitions smoothly from one extended sequence to another, and not all of them rely on brute force or high-speed chases. Many moments lean more toward strategic mind games and psychological tension, which keeps the narrative engaging. Once again, the story provides a compelling espionage mystery, striking a strong balance between Bourne's personal journey and the CIA's relentless pursuit. The handheld camera work reaches its most extreme point during a mid-film fight scene. While the raw intensity works in many places, this particular sequence feels slightly over-edited, especially knowing that the actors performed intricate choreography that isn't fully appreciated in the final cut. The sound design occasionally borders on exaggerated, echoing stylistic choices from earlier entries. Still, these issues are largely confined to that moment. Throughout the rest of the film, the visual and audio elements come together effectively, creating a tense and immersive atmosphere that holds your attention right through the closing credits. This trilogy has remained one of my favorites, no matter how many times I revisit it. Interestingly, each viewing tends to shift my favorite installment, a testament to how consistently strong the series is. While I'll always have a soft spot for the first film because of its tighter, more character-driven approach, this entry stands out as the most exhilarating and arguably the most accomplished. Looking at the IMDb ratings for the trilogy, I was surprised to see that, unlike many franchises, the third installment holds the highest score. That discovery raised my expectations, and I'm glad to say the film largely lives up to them. Behind the scenes, production wasn't without its turbulence. The initial screenplay by returning writer Tony Gilroy was reportedly rushed as he prepared for his directorial debut. Tensions arose with Matt Damon openly criticizing the draft. Despite the rocky start, the combined efforts of Scott Z. Burns, George Nolfi, and Gilroy ultimately shaped a script that delivers a fitting finale. The story sends Bourne back into hiding, merging the intense action of the second film with the tightly wound espionage elements of the first. A cleverly inserted flashback connects the trilogy in a meaningful way, gradually unraveling Bourne's past while sharpening the stakes. Each revelation tightens the net cast by the CIA, escalating the tension. The pacing is particularly impressive. Every brief exchange with an operative or assassin naturally escalates into either a brutal close-quarters confrontation or a heart-stopping chase. Even when the action takes center stage, the narrative never loses focus. Every step Bourne takes toward uncovering his identity forces the CIA into increasingly desperate measures, ensuring the story remains both personal and urgent. In the end, it's a sharp, intense, and satisfying close to a trilogy that redefined modern action thrillers. For what marked his final chapter in the series after nearly a decade, director Paul Greengrass delivers action that hits with unapologetic force. The fight sequences land with brutal impact, each punch and counterstrike framed clearly, thanks to Greengrass keeping just enough visual distance for us to register every crushing blow. Alongside cinematographer Oliver Wood, he orchestrates vehicular mayhem with sleek tracking shots and razor-tight editing that captures Bourne's brand of beautifully controlled chaos. Echoing the raw paranoia of the Bourne identity, Greengrass and Wood masterfully manipulate space and camera movement to create an atmosphere thick with suspicion. The on-location chases through London and Tangier pulse with unease, every subtle camera shift suggesting danger lurking just out of sight. The film thrives on that tension. Spies and assassins may be hidden in plain sight, but the mood never lets us relax. Scott Glenn steps into the role of Ezra Kramer with a hardened, tobacco-roughened authority, while returning allies Julia Stiles and Joan Allen lend intelligence and poise as Nikki Parsons and Pam Landy. Paddy Considine's inexperienced reporter Simon Ross becomes a pivotal piece in the puzzle, while Albert Finney's Dr. Albert Hirsch looms quietly in the background, tying Bourne's fractured past to the present. At the center of it all, Matt Damon anchors the film with a performance that balances physical precision and emotional urgency. His Bourne isn't just running from the CIA, he's chasing the truth about himself, and Damon keeps that search front and center amid the explosions and espionage. Realism may not be the film's strongest suit, but as a pulse-bounding thrill ride, it's hard to top. From the shocking assassination amid the crowds of London's Victoria Station to the relentless pursuit of a CIA operative threatening Bourne's ally, the set pieces are staged with nerve-shredding intensity. One standout moment, a sudden crash through an apartment window, feels instantly iconic, and the climactic car chase, pure adrenaline. Character depth is streamlined, leaning toward clear-cut heroes and villains, yet Damon's commanding presence ensures the film never loses its emotional anchor. The story may twist and loop in complex ways, but it ultimately circles back with satisfying symmetry. While many effects-heavy blockbusters feel hollow, this franchise earns its place at the top of the genre. If anything, it sets a benchmark that imitators struggle to match. As Joseph Conrad observed in The Secret Agent, deception in the political and revolutionary sphere can reshape reality itself. That sentiment resonates here, as the machinery of intelligence agencies blurs truth and fabrication in equal measure. It's an imperfect world, and Bourne is caught in its gears. Here's my challenge. Find a sharper spy thriller from the same year, or concede that the Bourne Ultimatum stands as a masterclass in modern action cinema, even edging past formidable competitors. Paul Greengrass reinforces his reputation as a director capable of blending intelligence with spectacle, keeping audiences riveted from start to finish. For 3 years, Jason Bourne has been hunting the only target that matters, his own identity. Amnesia, once part of his conditioning, has become the obstacle he must overcome. Bodies fall in his wake with astonishing efficiency, and while the feats sometimes stretch believability, the film's conviction makes it easy to buy into Bourne's supremacy. Damon projects both intellect and physical dominance with such assurance that disbelief fades into exhilaration. Part of the enjoyment lies in the global sweep, from Turin to Tangier to London's bustling Waterloo Station, where Bourne maneuvers through crowds with the CIA closing in. A standout sequence sees him guiding a reporter remotely via cell phone, transforming modern technology into a tool of survival. It's tense, kinetic, and brilliantly staged, like being led through a cinematic maze by a master tactician. In the end, the film is athletic, suspenseful, and fiercely entertaining. Strap in, surrender to the momentum, and let Bourne take the wheel. The Bourne Ultimatum brushes against timely issues like state-backed rendition programs and morally gray intelligence tactics without turning into a lecture. When Jason Bourne challenges one of his pursuers to confront what they've become, killers detached from purpose, the moment carries weight beyond the chase. And when CIA official Noah Vosen, David Strath, coolly implies his division operates without meaningful oversight, the subtext about unchecked power is hard to miss. Yet the film never forgets it's a summer thriller. It balances political undertones with pulse-bounding spectacle, delivering a finale that leans into high-octane improbability. That's part of the fun. After enduring a sluggish musical biopic earlier that week, I was more than ready for something sharp, fast, and efficient, and Bourne delivered exactly that. I do have one plea for the powers that be: let this be the final chapter. Some trilogies end on the perfect note and don't need a fourth movement. This saga began with a man floating nameless in the Mediterranean and concludes with him finally confronting the truth of his origin. While the second installment held its own, this third entry feels like the true culmination, emotionally and narratively. Bourne is still carrying the grief introduced earlier in the series, but now he's closer than ever to untangling the web behind his identity. The story once again sends him racing across continents, uncovering secrets alongside the audience. The action is relentless, but it's driven by intelligence rather than noise. The screenplay respects viewers enough to weave tension with strategy. Joan Allen stands out once more, bringing authority and nuance to her role. The cinematography favors grit over gloss, and the hand-to-hand combat scenes are intense without relying heavily on flashy digital shortcuts. It's refreshing to watch an action film where danger feels tangible and the stakes are real. That said, suspension of disbelief does get tested. A rooftop pursuit that defies physics and a spectacular car crash that leaves Bourne remarkably steady might raise eyebrows. Still, these moments are minor bumps in an otherwise gripping ride. By the time the credits roll, accompanied by Moby's extreme ways, now inseparable from the series, you're reminded why this franchise stands apart. It respects continuity, builds character arcs across films, and rewards loyal viewers. Seeing all 3 chapters enhances the impact, especially as Bourne shifts between predator and prey in a tense game of intelligence chess. His uneasy alliance with Pamela Landy deepens, while Nicky Parsons' expanded presence adds emotional texture to the narrative. Compared to louder summer blockbusters, this film feels leaner and smarter. It doesn't rely on spectacle alone. It earns its thrills. Matt Damon's portrayal cements Bourne as one of modern cinema's most compelling action protagonists, a man caught between weapon and human being, fighting to reclaim agency over his own story. In the end, the Bourne Ultimatum isn't just another action sequel. It's a fitting, high-impact conclusion to a trilogy that knew when to run and when to stop. The close-quartered fisticuffs combat in the earlier movies have rather been quite a hallmark, as Bourne dispatches his opponents with hard-hitting series of punches and kicks, and contained what is probably more realistic human-to-human fights, which doesn't seem choreographed given its realism. But having too much of a good thing becomes a repetitive bore, and thankfully, such scenes are kept short and sharp and few and far between. What is excellent here is how Bourne utilizes more of his smarts to outwit, outplay, and outlast his opponents, and those sequences in England and New York are testament to that smart, adrenaline-pumping, thrilling, and at the end of it, you can't help but to cheer. Like any self-respecting spy movie, Ultimatum had its fair share of jet-setting locations in Europe, clocking up frequent flyer miles. Nothing beats having to go to new location after new location where the story takes you, and being a man on the run, this is but part of standard protocol. And the movie can't be complete without the complimentary car chase sequence, and this Paul Greengrass-directed installment could possibly have one of the best I've seen in recent years, with the car as a battering ram, and everything going boom and bang right at your face, directly to the camera. I reckon if watch on the IMAX, you'll probably start to cower and shield yourself from the flying debris. The Bourne Ultimatum is a winner, and a fine wrap-up of the franchise should it choose to end at this point. Besides the ending of Smock and Aces, the ending here will also be one of my personal favorites, as it cunningly showed everything coming to full circle, and with Moby's extreme ways, the theme song used in all the Damon Bourne movies, comes blaring through the speakers. It's just plain sweetness.